Well, tensions are rising between India and Pakistan over a disputed area in between the two countries. The conflict comes over the Himalayan territory of Kashmir. The two sides both claim ownership of it, have fought two wars over control of the land. India escalated tensions on Monday when it revoked special semi-autonomous status for Kashmir. In retaliation, Pakistan announced today that it's downgrading its diplomatic relations with India. Michael Kugelman joins us now from Washington. He's the deputy director of the Asia program at the Wilson Center. So, Michael, give us a sense on what's the latest and where things stand between India and Pakistan.
Well, the latest is that Pakistan has responded. It's retaliated through diplomatic means. It has recalled its ambassador to India, and it's also cut off trade relations with India. And it has promised, or it has threatened, that it could do more as well. I think what we could expect to come next is for Pakistan to launch, or to attempt to launch, an international campaign to try to get the world to rally around Pakistan and to condemn India for its decision to, its unilateral decision to change the status of Kashmir.
We know Pakistani leader Imran Khan was just at the White House a short time ago recently. Why do you think it is that India has moved to revoke Kashmir's status on Monday?
Well, I mean, the ruling party in India, the BJP, had telegraphed its intention for a number of years to make this very move that it made the other day. But in terms of why now, I think you really have to go back to President Trump's comments when Pakistani Prime Minister Khan was in Washington, when President Trump offered to mediate on Kashmir. That is something that India has never wanted. India has never welcomed the third-party mediation. And I think India was very concerned after it heard that, and it decided to essentially send a very strong message to President Trump in the U.S. by saying, well, look, we don't need any mediation on this dispute because there is no dispute anymore. We've revoked, we've changed Kashmir's status, and now it's formally a part of India. So there's really nothing to discuss, and there's no need for mediation. So I do think that President Trump's remarks about Kashmir, even though they were relatively offhand in nature, I think that may have been the trigger that compelled India to make this very drastic move when it did.
And we know that Modi is expected to come to the U.S. this fall. Any sense of whether he'll meet with the president?
Well, that remains to be seen. Of course, the two of them met at the G20 conference not too long ago. I imagine that they probably will want to meet just because both sides, both the Indians and the Americans, really take this partnership seriously. And I think that's actually one reason why the U.S. public reaction to India's decision to change the status of Kashmir has been muted. There's been no public reaction at all. So if for nothing else, I think the two leaders will want to sit down and reiterate their commitment to their partnership, which could have suffered a bit of a problem, a bit of a bump after Trump made these offhanded remarks about his willingness to mediate on Kashmir.
And we know that this has been a significant escalation, but sort of put this into perspective, how unprecedented is it, the fact that in Kashmir there is no internet, there is no phone service, you can't phone in and you can't phone out? What are the conditions for these folks on the ground?
No, you're absolutely right. Particularly in a part of Kashmir known as the Kashmir Valley, where some of the anti-state sentiment and some of the sentiment in favor of independence from India has been strongest, that's where the conditions are worse. I mean, as you note, there's been a complete lockdown, communications have been cut off, and what's particularly extraordinary and unprecedented is that you still have several top local leaders in Kashmir under house arrest. That is something that has never happened before. So I think the big question is what happens? What happens when India eases up? What happens when it ends this lockdown? Because you could imagine that, Kashmiris, particularly Kashmiri Muslims in the Kashmir Valley, they are not going to be happy at all to hear about this decision that India has made. So many of these Kashmiris, have wanted nothing to do with the state of India. And now they're going to find out that they have been brought into a case where they're formally a part of a state that they deeply despise. So I think that's something to look for in the coming days, is what happens when these conditions are eased, if they are eased.
And we know that the United Nations is weighing in on the conflict. They released a statement in part saying, we are deeply concerned that the latest restrictions in Indian-administered Kashmir will exacerbate the human rights situation in the region. Do you know what role the UN could potentially play with this situation?
Well, I think if there's one global actor that we could look to get involved in a sustained way in this issue, it would be the UN, just because there is a history here. In the very distant past, in the 1940s and 50s, the UN did come out with a few resolutions that had called for a plebiscite to take place in Kashmir to decide for Kashmiris to decide on the fate of their country if the region were to be demilitarized. The plebiscite never happened. So I'm not really sure the UN would be in a position to do that much. Perhaps there would be some type of resolution that would be issued calling on both sides to use restraint in terms of how they go about this crisis, calling on India to be careful about the human rights conditions. But at the end of the day, the UN is a powerful institution, but it doesn't have the ability to actually really compel a nation state to do anything. So it's not like the UN could get the Indians to go back on their decisions. So I think anything that would come out of the UN would essentially be statements, words, resolutions, but nothing more than that.
Yeah, and many people want to see some action. Okay, Michael Kugelman, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.